Welcome back. We're going to discuss once again the off-season outlooks for teams. Keep in mind that the plan is to have the regular season start early in December. Free agency won't be till November 1st. So I'm not going to have time to do the full-on previews that I would normally do for each team because we're not going to have that time between a Stanley Cup and free agency and all that stuff. So I'm going to start off with Winnipeg. Because, again, I did a video not too long ago on how I felt they were the best chance for Canada to win a Stanley Cup. And I still kind of feel that way. You look at the teams that, as I'm recording this, are still mathematically in it. Montreal, Calgary, and Vancouver. And yes, there are key pieces on each team which give hope for the future. But I still think Winnipeg is most likely. That being said, Kevin Cheveldayoff as general manager needs to make the right moves. I think if Cheveldayoff doesn't manage to keep this team in contention next year, if the Jets were to fall, Cheveldayoff's time as general manager might actually be in danger of coming to an end. Coach Paul Maurice, it's interesting. When the Jets go into losing streaks, there will be calls for Paul Maurice's head because in the sports world, that's kind of what happens. It's easier to get rid of the coach than the players. So, I think Maurice is pretty safe. I think Cheveldayoff is as well for at least the next year. We'll see what happens next year. And, of course, they lost in 4 against the Calgary Flames. The highlight of that was Laine goes down with injury, Scheifele goes down with injury, and Calgary kind of bullied them out. Now, it's not meant to diminish what the Calgary Flames did. The Calgary Flames was a very impressive 4-game win over the Winnipeg Jets. But it did show that the Jets probably need a little more depth, and it kind of sort of exposed that blue line. I mean, they were holding it together during the regular season, but in the return, not as much. Their top 6 forwards, and again, this is projected for next year. So when I do this for each team, it'll be projected for next year who should be the top 6. And then in the magenta color over here, I've got guys who might push their way in. Same with top 4 defensemen, top 2 goaltenders. And then I'm going to have a guy in blue who's a big question mark for me out of everybody. Now, top 6 forwards, you got Wheeler, Connor, Laine, Scheifele, Ehlers. Little's the guy with a question mark as well because Little, we don't know if his career's going to continue once we get to next regular season. Brian Little, very concerned, about his ongoing issues since taking that puck in the ear. And still not 100%. I do hope he comes back. I think, honestly, Little takes way too much criticism and doesn't get enough credit that when he's in the lineup, I do think he makes a difference. Now, if he's out, Jack Roslovic, of course, who I would never forget, absolutely has that top 6 potential. Jensen Harkins showed he could play up and down the lineup, and Matthew Perreault can step into a top 6 role if needed at times. The big question mark for me is Vesalainen. Is Vesalainen not going to make it? Or how soon do we reach that point where we say, well, Christian Vesalainen likely not going to be the guy for Winnipeg. Too bad, so sad, and move on. It's the blue line that, yes, there are issues with the Winnipeg blue line. Not going to lie, I don't think anybody should or will state that the blue line's necessarily their strength, but it wasn't as bad this year as was expected. So Dustin Byfuglien, of course, saying, well, I'm not coming to work, just when he was supposed to be there. And so it fell onto a top 4 that may end up being Morrissey, Pionk, Beaulieu, and Pullman. Now, Beaulieu is UFA. But I think Beaulieu, it would be in his best interests and Winnipeg's best interest to bring him back. Now, Niku started getting more ice time at certain points of the year, and Ville Heinola, of course, has that potential to be a top 4 defenseman, could very well step in and make a big difference. Winnipeg needs help on the blue line, and I think we saw in that series against Calgary, they could use a little more sandpaper up front, and a Tkachuk-type player, where in these top 6, the toughness from that top 6 isn't really there. They could probably use a top 6 grinder-ish type. And it's not like power forwards are easy to find right now. Basically, you draft one or you sign one as a free agent. When you sign one as a free agent, well, you might end up with a Milan Lucic-style contract. So it is not an easy thing to do. But I do believe this blue line can be fixed. Goaltending, Hellebuck and Brossoit. Did they bring back Brossoit? Brossois' UFA this fall as well. I'm again going to be catching myself saying this summer a lot because we're used to UFA time being summer. But Brossois' contract being up, I do wonder if you're Winnipeg, are you better off to bring in, say, a Hudobin type backup where he play more games? You have more faith in him to be able to maybe carry the team a little bit. And then if something happens to Hellebuck, again, coming back to Hudobin, where Bishop's been out, Hudobin's been okay. And in Winnipeg, if something happened to Hellebuck, would you trust Brossois for an extended period? I would say probably not. So the other issue, too, is you'll notice there's no third goaltender here. Well, yes, Comrie's technically there. I don't know that they necessarily have that next in line guy. So I do have some questions about the goaltending outside of Hellebuck being one of the best goalies in the league. Absolutely. Does he deserve the Vezina? Yes. But behind him, you've got to have somebody. You can't have him playing 55, 60 games every year because once you get to playoff time, it's easy then for a goaltender to get worn down. Now, their cap space, $15.6 million. If weaponized correctly and if they find a way to get Little's contract off the books. That's where it gets kind of tricky. If Little isn't going to come back, that's $5 million they might be able to get off the books. Now, maybe you do like a Hossa thing where he's LTIR, or maybe you do like a Hossa thing and you trade that contract somewhere else that they could put him on LTIR. But that's going to be the interesting one right there, is whether or not that cap hit actually comes off next year, because if so, they have way more cap space. And then you can really start talking about remaking a lineup where you've already got a pretty good young core. UFAs, once we reach the official UFA season, Cody Eakin, who I thought fit in pretty well. If Eakin wanted to stick around, I would think they'll find a way to make it happen. Shore, Bork, these are your depth guys that you're replacing every year anyways. If they want to come back, they can on probably league minimum. If not, they're guys you can replace from within or sign other fourth line guys. Kulikov is going to be the interesting one. I didn't think Kulikov had a fantastic return, and again, his money coming off the books is probably for the best for that Winnipeg blue line, but they do need depth. And that's where, if Beaulieu was to leave, if they kept DeMello, if they kept Zbiza, of course, they picked up on waivers after Anaheim had signed him. And then there's Boteto. Boteto is a number 7 defenseman, decent enough number 7 option. And, of course, as I mentioned before, Brossois. There isn't anybody really prohibitively expensive in here, which is why I like the cap space issue for Winnipeg. Yeah, Line A's contract's going to be up, and when Line A's contract's up, it's highly likely he will get a lot more money. He did sign a bridge contract with the idea of making more money later, and as it turns out, it might have been the best move for him anyways, because hopefully by the time that bridge contract's up, we're coming out of what we're going through right now economically, and then he can make this big money. RFAs, Roslovic, Harkins, Appleton, Niku. I'm very impressed with Roslovic, Harkins, and Appleton up front. All three of these guys can play various roles up front. And I like Winnipeg's development system. These guys come up clearly able to play pretty much any position anywhere in the lineup. And this is part of the reason why I see Winnipeg. I look at how this team's put together. I look at how they're able to make it work and stay competitive. When you look at them on paper and say, well, there's some top-end talent, but I don't know if the depth's there. And yet they're still able to stay competitive. Now, how they handle this in the offseason, we'll see. They do have the number 10 pick as a result of getting knocked out of the play-in round. It's not the number 1 pick that they would have had because the original draft lottery, of course, the letter that got picked was the one that would have been assigned to them if we hadn't had the play-in rounds. But if we hadn't had the play-in rounds, we wouldn't have had all the fun stuff we did in the play-in rounds, right? But the number 10 pick is interesting because there are a lot of really good prospects in this draft. And at number 10, they're going to get a good player. Probably not a guy who's ready to play right away, but they're going to get a good player. And not only that, they may very well be able to find a defenseman who can help solidify that spot. Now, do you look at Schneider? Gooley's probably a one that you could get later in the first round. Maybe if they're looking for a defenseman in the first round, maybe you can trade down and get more picks. Because in the first 3 rounds, which is what I'll cover in these videos from here going forward, the only other pick they have is number 40. So again, it's a deep draft. An early second round pick isn't bad. But I think this is a team that's likely able to do some sort of a minor retool here and maybe get themselves back into contention. Maybe a target for them is Pietrangelo. Maybe a target for them is Krug if he should happen to leave Boston. Maybe when there's a defenseman that's available, this is a team that can afford to open their wallet a little bit, spend about $8 million, depending on what the going rate is. It'll lead into that cap space quickly, but to me it feels like they're a top 4 defenseman, maybe a little bit of grit in that top 6 away from being a legitimate contender in the West. I don't think they're as far away as I would think most probably think they are after what happened against Calgary. I think that was just in the first period of the first game. Automatically, the odds are stacked against them. You can't lose Scheifele, and then they lose Laine in the same game. That's just so many goals, so many points. 2 dynamic members of the top 6. It's hard to recover from that. But I like Winnipeg's chances still. Remember, when I did the video talking about how I thought Winnipeg was the best chance for a cup, I said straight in that video, I didn't mean this year. And I don't. I still think that when you look long term, this is still a young roster. You look at the key guys, they're still pretty young. And you've got a goaltender who is in his prime in Connor Hellebuck, who's playing really well. I think this team could surprise some people. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Who do you think they target? Where do you think they go from here? Are they destined to fall off the radar a bit, or do they bounce back next year? Let me know your thoughts on that. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And hey, thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I'll talk to you again soon.